What a story, Mark.
Doot, doot. The train is pulling into the station. We're here at the Nostalgia Junction. Matt, how's it going? Welcome to Framewreck, our show that we do here about So Bad They're Good movies, but we're putting a little spin on it this month. How's it going?
Yeah, doing all right. Yeah, this month we're not doing Framewreck proper. We're doing Nostalgia Junction, where
Nostalgia
we're not
Junction.
necessarily
What's
talking
your
about exactly. We're not necessarily talking about so bad they're good movies, but this month we're talking about movies that I loved as a kid that Dylan had never seen, and specifically we're talking about some swashbuckling adventures. Really, only because I put these three movies together, and that's the thing they had in common.
Yeah, we each have like a list of our childhood favorites that, like, admittedly, because this is Framewreck, there is like kind of a tinge of like these aren't as well received in the public like eye unless you're like of a certain age and you were of a time. And I have a list of movies like that too. So we kind of have collaborated behind the scenes on like what other movies we want to cover like in this lens, because I really do think some movies it's like I was the perfect age when it came out, so like it's not gonna ever be bad to me, or there the rare occasion where I will watch something later in life and I'll be like, oh, that was bad, or I'll be like, oh, that was bad, but I still love it because I was a kid. So, or it's just genuinely good and you're like, oh, okay, so this was good as a kid. Like there's really like a 4-quadrant thing where like it could belong in either one of them, which is why it's going to be fun. So we let Matt take this one, and he obviously said he put together like swashbuckling adventure was his theme. And then we might have another one later in a few months with my theme, which is a little more loosely based. And then we'll like kind of keep doing these if people like them. Also, because I think this kind of lends itself to be more movie clubby, like kind of pull some questions and just try to get some more fan engagement, because you know a lot of other people have nostalgia for these films as well. So I think this is going to be a fun little experiment, just like our Framewreck just like our Framewreck Redemption. I mean, we've really kind of taken the show to new avenues, because you know you don't want to hear the same stuff every time, you know.
Right. Never getting stale. That's we want to keep it all fresh. And to keep it fresh, we've gone way back in time.
Matt set the scene. I mean, this feels very picture this, but like set the scene of where you were in life around the time these movies came out. And actually, we should probably tell you all what the movies are that we are covering if you didn't look at the thumbnail closely. Matt, why don't you tell us what those movies are and then kind of set the scene for us?
Well, these movies all came out in the very early 90s. And they are Pagemaster from 1994, Three Musketeers from 1993, and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves from 1991. I did that in reverse chronological order because that's the order we're going to talk about them. Yeah, so for me, early 90s was there was a lot of moving around for me because my parents had split up when I was like 2. So that was the 80s. But so by the 90s, my mom's alone. My mom's on her own, has 2 kids. We're just trying to survive. We're moving places a lot. I moved a lot as a kid. I went to so many schools when I was a kid. But the constant was that mom would always take us to the video store to get some movies, no matter where we were. And she also, I don't know how long this particular company was was around. So I don't know if everybody's going to understand this, but we had a couple of different accounts with Columbia House, which back in the day was a company that if you paid them 1 penny, they would send you like 10 VHS tapes, but you had to commit to buy 2 tapes within the next year. Now, videotapes back then were a lot more expensive than they became later. Like a lot more expensive. So getting a bunch of free ones was awesome. But then it's like, oh, but you have to pay $40 for this VHS tape within the next year. And if you're broke, that kind of sucks.
So did you get to keep the ones they send you, or was it like it's like a rental? You get 10 ones, you give them back, and then you have to buy 2? Or like how did it work? You just got to keep
you kept them. They were ours.
That could be essentially like 120. If you're getting 10 a month, that's 120 VHSs for 2. I think that's a good steal. No?
Not 10 a month. You get 10 immediately, and then within the next
Oh,
year, you have to buy
gotcha.
2.
Okay,
So
you're getting 8 for free, basically.
Basically. And then put someone else's name. This was a time before the internet, so maybe I had an account at just 8 years old, where we got more free movies for a penny, and then had to buy 2, and then so we
got the same 10, or like
no, you get to choose them. This is what was funny. This was pre-internet, so like thinking back to it is crazy. They would send you a sheet of like that you would mail back with like 10 squares on it, and you would go through this like magazine catalog thing, which had a bunch of stickers for the movies in it.
Oh, and you would
peel off one of the stickers, stick it to the thing until you had your 10. You'd send it back, and then they would send you your movies. And when they sent you your movies, every month they would send you a letter saying, hey, this month's movie is whatever. We're going to send this to you automatically unless you send this slip back. So you just keep sending that slip back until they're like, look, you have to buy a movie.
We're cutting you off. That's great.
So anyway, we had a few accounts with that. So we had a bunch of movies. Mom would take us to the video store every Friday, and we'd go to the video store. We go to Pizza Hut and get a Bigfoot pizza for me, my sister, and my mom, which it's a giant rectangular pizza that they used to sell at Pizza Hut.
So Bigfoot didn't actually like make it.
Right. No Sasquatches were involved in this.
Gotcha.
But we go to the video store. So movies was a huge part of our life, partially because we moved so often. Getting cable wasn't always an option for us.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of times we just didn't have TV, and we just had these videotapes. Anyway, these 3 were movies that we did own, and I watched so often, like so many times, because I was the kind of kid who would watch a movie at night, go to bed, get up the next morning before anybody else, put that tape back in and watch it again. Then once it was over, I'd either switch to one of the other tapes or watch that tape again. So that's the kind of kid I was.
I was the same way. Just I was at the very tail end of the VHS craze, so like it was very much like still my parents putting stuff on for me. But those Disney sing-along tapes, like I grew up on those. I don't know if you probably know what they are, right? Yes.
Yeah, they have.
Yes, like I literally watched those until the VHS tapes didn't work anymore. And I would do the same thing. I'd watch them all, and by then I had like 10 to 12 of them. So by the time I finished the 12th one, I'm like, oh, I forgot what the songs were on the first one, and I'd rewatch them all. So like it's the same idea of like if you don't have cable, who cares? Because you have all this stuff available to you. That's why I'm such a proponent of physical media. Because what if your Wi-Fi's down one day? What if there's a problem and you can't get onto your Netflix, or the stupid sharing stuff where it's like, you need only 2 accounts. So if your brother's watching and your dad's watching, you got to use your phone. Nope, you can't get on. What do you want to do? And that's why physical media is so important, I think. And I know you agree, but physical media can't die. We can't let it die, as sad as it is. And I really do think video stores are sadly a bygone era, but I wish they would come back. I mean, Barnes and Noble still has a section, at least around where I am. Like there's Barnes and Nobles are always great places to like kind of get that feel for a video store, but even then it's not the same vibe. It's not, you don't smell the popcorn. You don't smell, like the microwavable popcorn boxes they would have where it's like, you can kind of smell the butter in the air. You don't have the idea of the person going up and being like, oh, well, here's what you can watch, or here's what I recommend, kind of, which is also a charm to the video store idea of it all too. Because that's how, like you said, without the internet, that's how people found out about movies. It was either they saw it in theaters, their friends saw it in theaters, or they knew the guys at the video store or their friends at the video store. Like it was always kind of just happenstance at times. Now, were these movies you like sought out because you had heard of them, or you were like, you saw commercials, or you saw them in theaters, or was it like, oh, this is part of our 10 this month, this looks interesting? Like, how did you stumble upon? Do you remember? Or probably
it's hard to say. I mean, I can tell you, I can kind of talk about that with each movie, but I can tell you with our first one that we're going to talk about, Pagemaster, that one was very much, this one's coming out. I'm excited. I've got to see it. Right. Macaulay Culkin was the thing.
he was at the peak right now. So this was after Home Alone, after Home Alone 2, and after My Girl. So he's like kind of cruising on that riding on that high. So that
Right.
was like oh, I know that face. I want to watch it because of him kind of thing.
Right. And I was the kind of kid who, because I watch these movies over and over again, I was also the kind of kid who would watch the credits. So I knew people's names that other people didn't. It's kind of, it's weird, but for a fifth grader who could tell you that freaking Gilbert Gottfried played Iago, it was kind of weird back then because this wasn't a time of the internet. If you wanted to know that, you had to watch the credits and see who played these characters.
Well, Matt, I admire that because I hate, there's nothing I hate more than when everyone's just trying to rush you out of the theater when the credits are rolling, and I'm always one who stays for the credits, and not just because of the Marvel inside of me. Like I know you are too. Like it's just like one of those things. It's like so many people work on that movie, and it's not until, at least for me, it wasn't until my brother was in one, because my brother, got in a movie before I did. Woohoo! Good job, Jake. No, but it was not until he was in a movie where I'm like, I want to look at the credits for my brother's name, and then I was like, what if I'm that sound design caterer of that sound design building from 5 miles away from the studio? Like that's still a name that you're gonna have in the credits, and for every person that worked on it, that's a special moment to them. And it's like you spent so much time watching the actors, now give some time to everyone else, And I that's why I've always been a proponent of watching the credits. So I applaud you, my friend.
I do too. Like I still to this day I won't leave unless I have to. Unless it's like,
unless
oh
your
god, I
bladder's
gotta
gonna
be so bad or
explode
something like.
Yeah. And even then, like
or
usually
I
I'll
have to get to my
swing
next
back around.
movie. My next movie is starting right now. Like those are the only times I'll leave during the credits. But otherwise, I stay because every person whose name is on there did work in that movie. I just appreciate it.
It's also part
they
of the
deserve to be seen.
It's also part of the movie. The movie is from start to end, whatever the runtime is, and that last credits can kind of, especially with the music they play, and that's a big conversation I have with these three movies. Sometimes the music they play during the credits is kind of adding to the overall feel of it. Like you need that debrief. Like, I mean, a recent one in theaters, Zone of Interest. Like, there's a feel in the credits when that movie ends that gives you that if you just rush out of the theater before the credits, like you wouldn't get, like stuff like that, where it's like sometimes the credits can literally give you that satisfying closure or give you like something to linger with that maybe the movie on its own can't,
Right. Well, and it's funny because occasionally, it's very rare, but occasionally a good Samaritan will lean down to me as they're passing by and say, "There's no after credit scene," and I'm like, "Man, I appreciate that. You're being nice, but that's not what I'm doing. I don't like that you think that that's what I'm doing." But that's
usually if that happens, I'll just be like, shh, I'm watching, and they'll be like, just to fuck with them, and it'd be like, yeah, fuck you, asshole. Sorry, we're getting vulgar here. But this is more conversational based. We don't want to structure this show. We want to keep it nice and flowing. And that's that's my little rant on movie theaters and movie theater behavior. But hey, if you're gonna be courteous and not talk during a movie, the movie's still playing as long as the credits are rolling. Stop.
Right. Exactly.
Anyway, so we can start with Pagemaster. We already kind of segued into it. So you were on the Macaulay Culkin train in the Macaulay Culkin junction.
Right.
Wow, I messed up that joke because I can't speak. Tell me a little bit more about just your journey with
Okay, so Macaulay Culkin, he's a household name at this point. Not just for me who reads the credits, but in general. He had been in a bunch of movies. He was also kind of branching out into other movies at the time, and this was short, like not long after this, he like stopped making movies until like for like a decade. But he was the name. Like you knew who Macaulay Culkin was. He was even getting into some more adult stuff. He was in a movie called The Good Son, which is kind of a thriller. This was the 90s, so yes, I watched that one too, even though it was made for grown-ups. But I basically watched everything my mom watched. This was Macaulay Culkin. He was a big deal. Plus, I knew that Christopher Lloyd was in it. He was Doc Brown from Back to the Future. So I was already like, okay, this is going to be awesome. The trailers were great. You could hear Whoopi Goldberg in playing fantasy. She had just played or was about to play a hyena in The Lion King.
What
This
year
was
was
the
this?
same year,
Yeah,
94.
so 94. So
It
she
was the
probably
same
was
year.
about
I don't.
to then, unless
Yeah.
because I think it was late at the year the Lion King came out in like October or
Yeah,
something.
so she's about to, but I knew who she was because I'm a weirdo. I was a little movie kid.
I mean, she was an Oscar
So
winner at that point, like, and she was, a very popular comedian. So like, it's
yeah,
fair to
no,
say you at
it's
least probably
true.
knew of
Oh
her,
yeah,
even if
I
you
mean
didn't
she
know
was
her
in
work.
Sister Act. I'm pretty sure that's
Yeah,
the thing I knew her from.
right.
But yeah, so I I was like, yes, I'm watching this movie. Um, it came out. I don't remember if I saw it in the theater. I saw things in the theater every once in a while, but we were poor. Like we didn't have a lot of money, so I didn't really get to go all that often. I don't remember if I saw this one in theater, but I do know that we bought it as soon as it came out on VHS tape, and it had a clamshell. It was one of the clamshell VHS tapes. And yeah, so I used to watch this movie a lot, all the time. I loved the there had already been movies that combine animation and
Live
live
action, yeah.
action. Who Framed Roger Rabbit's a big one that
Mhm.
we all know. The uh, there was a movie called Cool World with Brad
Mm,
Pitt that had come out around that time. So there was a lot of like that
right.
whole.
And
Uh,
even then, like, I even noticed, like, when I looked at the poster, I expected it to be a hybrid film, but it really, I mean, it is a hybrid film. There's two mediums going on, but it's very much when we're in the animated world, we're staying in the animated world until the very end. Like the live action kind of bookends it. It doesn't exist simultaneously,
right.
really,
Well, it's
which
more
is also
like
kind of unique.
it. It's actually more than like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's actually more like Wizard of Oz in that way.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
you're
and-
in sepia tone, then you're in color, and then you're back in sepia tone at the very end. It's like the bookmarks. And actually that was one of the things because we pulled some comments and stuff, but one of our listeners, Alan, said, if only because it would have evoked he wishes he watched it when he was at 14, if only because it would have evoked emotions of watching things like the never ending story and Wizard of Oz. I mean, I think it's a very
Mhm,
apt comparison, Wizard of Oz, because of that framing device. But that's also what surprised me about it. I expected it to be Macaulay Culkin and a bunch of animated characters, but then Macaulay
mhm.
Culkin was an animated character. So I was a little surprised. I was like, wow, this is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
A very much different film than I expected it to be. And I like it when it can just all be animation, because then you can really just kind of go ham with whatever
right,
kind of
exactly.
imagination thing you want.
So growing up, this is kind of funny. Um, there was a lot that I really liked about it, but the thing that kind of really connected it to me is that I was kind of that outsider kid. Like
Hmm.
I wasn't super popular, especially because I moved so much. It was hard to uh, always make friends. But like even so, like I was weirdo, and so it was hard for me to connect with like the cool kids or anything like that. Um, so having that aspect of his life kind of gave me this connection to him that like, hey, I'm friends with my books too, like like that's kind of that's kind of a connection that we have, a connection that I always thought we had but we don't. Is that this is so weird because a few years ago I introduced this to my children for the first time.
I was
We
about to
introduced
ask if your boys have seen this. Yeah.
they have this is actually the only one of these they have seen.
Okay.
um but they saw it a couple years ago. We got it on DVD, and I showed it to the boys and they loved it. But as I'm watching it this time, and I hadn't seen it in so many years, like at least 15 years by at this point, it may be longer. I'm watching it and I realize about by before like about right before the end, like it goes into the color, the cartoon part. I
Hmm.
realize they've never said at any point that that's his stepfather. Uh, and I go, I have always thought that that was his stepfather, and they never mention that at
Mm.
all. There's no reason for me to even assume that. The only thing I can say is that I infused my own
Yeah, you
dysfunction,
inserted your own story into it.
which
Yeah.
I didn't have a stepfather at that point. I didn't have a
Right.
stepfather until many years later. But the idea of like this broken family, like I inserted myself into that. So the whole time for most of my life, I thought that Richard Tyler's dad was actually his stepdad. And then I realized I'm watching and
I
I'm
mean, it
realizing,
might.
oh
There's
no,
no confirmation nor deniement, but
that's true, but they never say it. And
right.
and they mention. him being his. In fact, they mentioned it explicitly that it's his dad. At least he calls himself his dad, and so the proper inference from me is that that is his father, his biological father. So that was an interesting thing for me. The another thing the thing that I realized this time, and it was one of the few things that I kind of got from the rewatches of these, because I've seen them so many times that like I knew them all so well. But the thing I kind of got from it this time is that I think that if this had been made today, there would have been more of a focus on, I think, what is obviously Richard's autism that they don't really talk about, because they didn't talk about that back then at all.
Obviously, yeah.
And so, like, a lot of the characters from back then that are just kind of weird or outcasts or outsiders or really into certain types of things probably would be autistic or have ADHD today. Like you would that's the way you would characterize them. So I thought that was interesting, because as we're watching, I'm like, okay, this guy is on the spectrum probably. And I wouldn't have ever thought that back then, because that's not something that was ever really in that we talked about back then.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the questions I posted to the group, was like, if you were to remake this today, like, who would you cast as like the kid, and like who would you cast as like what are the big names? Because you look at this cast, this is a cast full of big names. Like you said, like Whoopi was huge at the time, coming off her Oscar win, coming off Sister Act. I mean, Patrick Stewart is obviously huge at the time. Christopher Lloyd, like all these people are so big at the time. Do you think you can remake this nowadays? Because I think some of the charm is that kind of 90s era drawn animation that you don't really see in a lot of films that aren't like Studio Ghibli nowadays. Like I really don't think you can make this film as successfully now. I mean, maybe with modern technology you can make something different, but it's never going to have that same nostalgic charm, I think.
I don't think so either. I think they captured something in it that, and especially because I don't think mostly I don't think you do, because I don't think it'd resonate with kids the way it did back then, because it would be, probably be more closer to what they did with Jumanji, which was make it into a video game. Like, I'm in a video game. Like,
well, and that's the thing, is because kids don't like to read anymore, which is sad. But what they read is on their tablets, on their phones, on their iPads, on their digital devices. Which I think if you were to make this story with like a guy going into his computer, a kid going into his computer, like it's not as fun. And I think that's one of the charms about it. I will tell you right now, this is my favorite of the three, only because I think it really kind of captures just what nostalgic spirit feels like, in my opinion, as someone who is not growing up during this time, but looking at it in the lens of, oh, this was a nostalgic favorite. I can definitely see why, because this does kind of have all those like beats that like reminded me of shows I watched as a kid. Like Dragon Tales was a big one when I was a kid that I was obsessed over. I watched Dragon Tales every single day for about 6 hours a day. That's an understatement, but the idea that they would like hold the scale and then they would go to this magical dragon land and then they would come home, and like it's kind of that whole thing of like you're going and being part of the adventure as a kid. And I think as a kid, when you're watching a movie and you want to like tap into the world, it's best when you have that kind of vessel to kind of see it through. And that's another reason I don't think you could remake it today, because there's no kid as big as Macaulay Culkin was at that time either. Like you don't have that one central kid. You have great kid actors. I mean, Woody Norman's fantastic right now. I mean, his voice is probably dropped by the time we're recording this. Jacob Tremblay was big at a time. His voice is also dropped, and he's like 7 feet tall now. But the whole thing of like, there's not that like movie star that is relatable to the kids of the generation right now. Maybe there is, that I'm just like not thinking of right off the top of my brain.
Here's the thing, is that all of the good kid actors now are known to adults, and all of the actors who are known to the kids are not like,
they're like influencers.
They're not
like
big
older, teenage,
or they are, they're not great actors or not well known, and like they aren't household names like Macaulay Culkin was. So like that's kind of thing. There's not really a household name that really fits that age group. So yeah, I agree. You were talking about the voice actors, and those two actors are really great. I didn't really know who Patrick Stewart was back then. So I knew who he was by sight, but I did not know his name was Patrick Stewart. So I did not realize that was Patrick Stewart until years later. But the fun thing is that Horror is played by Frank Welker, who famously plays Scooby-Doo, has played Scooby-Doo forever.
And I'd argue he's not even a household name, which is sad, because like him and Jim Cummings, who's also in this, are like probably the two most prominent vocal actors in anything. You watch something that's like straight to video or straight to TV or something, there's a good
Hmm.
chance either Frank Welker, Jim Cummings, or both are in it. You know, like Jim
Right.
Cummings was Winnie the Pooh, you know, like Frank Welker
Right.
was Scooby Doo, like you said. Like, and I think it's really cool that they were able to get the big celebrities whose voices are very unique. Like Patrick Stewart has a voice, Whoopi Goldberg has a voice that's instantly recognizable. But then to fill in the other parts, instead of stunt casting for the sake of getting the celebrity, they just went with someone who's going to capture the voice and the spirit of the character well, which is where
Hmm.
you get your Frank Welkers and your Jim Cummings. If they did that nowadays, they're probably casting all these celebrities. It's why I personally don't find Super Mario Bros. As good as others, because I think it's a lot of big celebrities in roles, but they're not adding much of like interesting vocal acting. Like they're just, you know, oh, that's Anya Taylor-Joy, that's Chris Pratt. You know, it's not like, oh, that is a full character voice, which is also why I think this movie is something that probably couldn't be made today, because you're not going to get your Frank Welkers or your Jim Cummings
Right.
to like even your Leonard Nimoy's, who is like also
Right.
not probably not a stunt cast at this time by the 90s. I think we've already kind of went over that wave of Leonard Nimoy
Right.
being big, and now he is just kind of offering a really cool vocal performance. It's not, oh, we're
Right.
getting Leonard Nimoy for this, you know. And I know stunt casting wasn't a huge thing till like Aladdin, which just came out right before this, so this is like kind of
Right.
still the brink of stunt casting for animated movies, but still, like I think there's a charm to the fact that you have both voice actors and regular celebrities just with iconic voices in it, rather than just celebrities all just kind of using their regular voices.
I agree, and the fun thing about it is that the celebrities, and like you mentioned before, like the Super Mario Brothers, I think in this movie the actors were given the characters that, like, those actors were put with those characters because they made sense for those characters, versus Super Mario Brothers where actors were hired based on their name and not because they fit the
Right.
characters.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so that's that I agree. I think that that's great. I wish we could kind of go back to that era where voice actors by trade are still getting a lot of work, and big name actors who are in them are only in them because they are the right actor for that role. Like that,
Mhm.
I love that era of
Yeah.
voice acting
Yeah.
because
I think
everybody's getting some, you know.
Yeah, I think of like the Hotel Transylvania movies, how a lot of it was like Adam Sandler's Dracula, Adam Sandler's Dracula. The fourth movie, he didn't want to come back. Who did they cast as Adam Sandler instead of a stunt cast? They cast Brian Hole, who was like a very famous like YouTube voice actor. He does all those like Disney singing videos as all the
Mhm.
characters. He got
Right,
hired, but then that movie didn't do well because they didn't really have anything to market it on, which is
right.
unfortunate for him because that could have been a real resurgence of his career, or not even resurgence, but surgence. Is that a word? I don't know.
It
Spur
is
of
now.
his start of his career. But I think because he's not Adam Sandler, they didn't market the movie around the star, and then that is how the only people who went to see that movie, it might have even been streaming, are the people who like the property rather than the actors. And I think that's kind of a problem too. Is if you don't have stunt actors nowadays, it's like how do you market it? And it's like market
Mhm.
it for the premise, because like this is a really cute premise. Like I'll admit, I didn't love this film as much as probably you have because I don't have that nostalgia, because it is more
Mhm.
geared towards kids, and that was the one thing that I felt a little distance from. Like I wasn't fully like, oh my god, this is so awesome, because I'm a 25-year-old watching this when I should have been with this since I was a kid. But I can appreciate just the mere premise of it and the imagination of it, and the idea of you kind of celebrating literature in a way and kind of making literature accessible to kids, which is also big at the time. You
Right.
want kids to get interested in classic literature. This is a great way to be like, oh, you ever heard of Treasure Island? You ever heard of Jekyll and Hyde? Like these very kind of important touchstones of culture and literature that maybe kids at that time don't know about, and this is the best way to introduce them. So I felt like this was like perfect for what it needed to be, even though I'm
Mhm.
not necessarily going to go back to it a lot because I'm not the right demographic now, having first seen it. But I can totally
Mhm.
see why you love this as a kid, because it
Right.
really is such a fun immersive film that I feel like you can see yourself in, as you said.
Right. And one thing that I really loved as a kid, I was just thinking about this, is that because we're going back to like Wizard of Oz and stuff like that, where um, it kind of has that same almost structure, at least in the way that it's made, which is that like it's bookended by the real world, and then the
Right.
like fantasy world is happening in the middle, and it is a different medium that it's
Hmm.
happening through. One thing that I always loved as a kid, that always bugged me. I had this weird thing as a kid where, or I guess it's probably not weird for kids to feel this way, but like the idea that that Wizard of Oz did not happen to Dorothy bugged me. Like if anybody tried to tell me that, I was just like, no. I mean, it happened. She's just,
Right.
it's
No, like
fine.
this is a documentary. Like
Yeah, and like my aunt would all the time be like, that was just in a dream, and I'm like, no, it wasn't. That really happened. That kind of thing. Not like a documentary, but like
oh, that like in the events
she
of the
was in
movie, she actually went to Oz and didn't dream.
right.
Got
That she also was. That's why recently, this last year, I discovered Return to Oz for the first time, which I wish would have been a movie I watched in my childhood because it was right up my alley and reaffirmed that she went to Oz originally.
Justification right there.
Anyway, what I love about this is that I didn't have to wonder about that because not only do the three books come back to them, there's actually a couple things that kind of justify this, which is number one, like where's his coat? Like he took off his coat during the whole like paint thing. So like when he's laying there on the ground, he doesn't have his coat anymore, and so I'm like, okay, so that's obviously after,
right.
Like anyway, not that, but that the three books come with him when he comes back, and then when he is up in his treehouse, you see their shadows and you hear them talking. It affirmed to me that was not just a dream. It wasn't because that he bumped his head. It actually happened, and that used to make me happy as a kid. Was that like I didn't have to deal with this nonsense that it might not have happened.
Right. So then when you, Matt, get your opportunity to step into a world of fiction and color and animation, it will actually happen and it won't just be a dream of yours. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Another thing, and this is the only other thing that I picked up this time, and it is in the movie explicitly, but I didn't really like the gravity of it didn't really hit me until this time, and I almost got like a little bit emotional as I said, is that horror mentions throughout that, or a couple times, that horror stories always have sad endings, and I realized this time watching it through is that by the end, horror gets his happy ending, and that's all he's wanted through the whole movie was to have a happy ending, and the fact that he gets to be checked out is his happy ending, and that made me happy this time, which I didn't really think about the other times that I'd watched as a kid. So.
Right. Like the more I talk about it, the more I really realize, because like my spoiler, my Letterboxd review wasn't very high for this. I wasn't like super all over the top, but it's because I'm looking at it from a certain angle. But like looking at it as like what it is aiming toward and the demographic it is looking toward, like this is really kind of how you make a kids movie. Like this is it. Now I think the difference that this, what separates this from something like a Pixar or Disney is the adult factor of like, can an adult get hooked into it? And this one is a little less so. I mean, it is very much geared towards kids, but I mean that if it goes for its target demographic and it nails it, then I mean, some movies don't need to exceed, exactly. just like we're not trying to sell Tarantino to kids. It's the opposite thing. It's like, we're not trying to sell this to adults. But it's great that you have this now as a nostalgic favorite to look back on with your kids and also see new layers as an adult that you're able to still love, which is great. Because it sounds like you still love it, which is good.
Yeah. We're not trying to sell Tarantino to kids. Back in 1994, they were a little bit, but no, now today they're not.
Matt dressed as Uma Thurman for Christmas with the needle and the bloody nose and everything. Yeah. He did the twist for a milkshake. All right. Any last things on the Pagemaster, Matt?
Well, how I'd like to hear. I guess I've heard your experience with it. Do you have anything else? Like how, if you were a kid.
Yes.
How do you imagine you would have felt about it?
And I did look at all these films in that lens of like, this wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. I hate that phrase because it's so overused, but like, it wasn't my speed. But if I was a kid, I would have loved it. And I think this is the number one of those three that, like, if I was a kid, I would have absolutely loved this, because I do love the stuff like the Wizard of Oz, the stuff where you're kind of like swept off in this fantastical journey. I also loved the animation so much as a kid. For some reason, it was just so much easier to cling on to, because I think when, they try to make it realistic, it's like, when there's any sort of flaws, like you're able to poke holes in it and you're like, but that's just actors and costumes. But here it's like, no, this is the world, like this is immersive. Like Mufasa is actually dead, like stuff like that, where it's like, I am actually sold that this is a real thing. Kind of like how, you were talking about Dorothy. I'm like, no, this actually happened. And I feel
Right.
like I would have bought that even more as a kid with the animation. For some reason, animation was more real to me than live action, which is so weird as
Nice.
a kid. But I mean, that's why this film is so cool, and I think I would love to show my kids this someday because when I have kids, I don't have kids. For anyone who is listening, who's like, "Oh, I want to see Dylan's kids," and you're never gonna, or you will, but not now. Hopefully, I don't know. I don't know. Someone marry me. No, but I do. No, but I really do love. I do love the idea of it, and again
Mhm.
because I feel like this generation's so like tapped into technology, where it's like, how many kids actually pick up a book? Like realistically, how many actually pick up a book? And I know your kids probably do because you're a good father, but like, I mean, how many kids actually like go out of their way when there's a video game and a book to pick up the book? And it's, I think, getting
Right.
rarer and rarer with time. And there was a time where it wasn't like that. Like I remember growing up, Harry Potter, it was like, no, all the kids were like, oh my God, what chapter of Deathly Hallows are you on? Like that was the thing. It wasn't, oh, what Game Boy game do you have in your hands? And then it kind of evolved into that as I went through elementary school. Like fifth grade, it was like, oh, we all have our phones in our hands. It was kind of sad. So
Mm.
I think this is one that I really would have appreciated for that as well, because I also do love classic literature. And I think we haven't even touched on the swashbuckling of it all. Like I like the pirate
Mm.
stuff, and I think
Yeah.
that's kind of fun. And you know, and I'll say with later films too, like I'm not a big fan of swashbuckling adventure as a whole because
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of the beats feel the same. But I think when you put it in a lens of animation and you make the color characters look more colorful and larger than life, I think it makes it a lot easier, especially for a kid, to get hooked and invested in that world. I think because growing up
Mhm.
as a kid, I was like not necessarily huge on like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, which were like my era's cup of tea. I was just kind of like,
Mhm.
after a while, I was like, all right, I get it. Like I'm more into, you know, if it's gonna be fantasy, I want like real like dragons and creatures. Like I want it to be full blown fantasy, not like, well, there's some like religious stuff going on, political stuff, and like obviously it's a heightened universe because like these characters have really got like, you know, these sword skills are really impressive, but like it is still set in some basis of reality. That's why actually
Mhm.
as a kid I like Dead Man's Chest and At World's End more, because it was like, oh, that's when we're getting into Davy Jones with like the big kraken, and you know everything was a little bit more fantastical. And I know you just made a face, Matt. No, I as a kid that stuff was more appealing because it was more fantastical.
Mhm.
Which
No.
nowadays I've seen the Black Pearl again, and it's the best one. But I like all
Right.
three. I do. I just think that I like the fantastical elements of it. So I think this one would have been my favorite as a kid, and it's my favorite of these three now. Like I think it's
Nice.
very very fun.
It's interesting because we have opposite experiences. Like this is the opposite experience. Like I saw this movie so much as a kid, and you're seeing it for the first time as an adult. I was an adult when those other movies came out, so I never got to
Right.
see them as from that lens. So
Right.
yeah, I love Black Pearl, but the other two I think have grown on me more in years since. But boy, was I disappointed with those back when I saw them in the theater.
Davy
Um,
Jones, he looks so cool.
he does
Oh
look cool. He
yes,
looks so cool.
fucking awesome.
Um, just,
Don't ruin
but
my childhood, man.
I'm
No, hey,
not.
guess
I'm
what? I
not.
will have my turn to talk about some nostalgic movies someday, and I will make sure we have a Gore Verbinski day where we just watch the Pirates movies, because I don't want to talk about 4 and 5. We don't have to talk about 4 and 5.
I
I
still
want to
haven't
talk
even
about the
seen
first.
those.
Yeah, don't.
Um, so one more thing about this movie that I wanted to talk about that used to like I loved when I was a kid was the moment at the end when he finally gets to the page, like he finally gets to the exit, and the page master is standing there, and he gets like so mad at him, and he's yelling. He's like, "He's the guy that did all of this to me." And the page master says, "Look what would have happened if I had brought you here with a turn of a page." And then he like brings all of the characters back to compliment Richard Tyler and tell
Mm,
him how brave he is and how awesome he is. And like I always loved that because it was like no matter what he like his anger and his like childishness didn't ruin this whole thing for him because the page master still had like just brought all these people here to tell him how brave he was. And like if the adventure didn't do it, like that's brought it home for him where he's like, "Oh, that's what's happened here." Like he had the adventure, he just didn't realize that he
right.
did it himself. Like
Hmm.
so I always loved that as a kid as well.
Cool.
Um so this was you said this was your favorite. I was going to ask how you felt about it, but you kind of went over that. But this was
Sorry,
your favorite. No, you're good. Please, better through the conversation than
we're
me
breaking the
asking.
form.
Yeah. So this is your favorite of the three. Who is your favorite character in this movie?
I mean, I love Whoopi. So like I mean
Mm,
fantasy, I have a soft spot for fantasy. I think she's fun. She got the spunk. As a kid I probably would have just loved Macaulay Culkin because like that's kind of the
mm,
audience's eye into it. But horror, I love horror. I mean, I
horror.
think that's the more interesting character in terms of like just unique animated creations. I think horror.
Hmm. Horror was my favorite when I was a kid,
Mm,
and he still is today. Like
right.
I still love him. I really love the bromance between him and Adventure,
Mhm.
especially when Adventure thinks that the Lilliputians have killed him, and he's and he's like eulogizing him and talking about how brave he is, and Horror is just laying there pretending to be dead, listening to it. I love their little bromance, but yeah,
Mhm.
Horror is my guy. Um, all right. So I think that's all. Do we have any comments on this one or questions or anything?
I kind of covered some of it. I mean, I did ask like just a question to everyone, like, what world would you want to live in? And Alan did have a fun response of, "Well, I wouldn't. I know it wouldn't be on the high seas. I worked on a cruise ship. I got seasick. I imagine a galleon would be much worse." But then he did say, he went on to say why he wouldn't choose the other ones, and then he kind of landed on Pagemaster of spending time in a library with Macaulay Culkin is like the kind of the world you want to be immersed in because like
Yeah.
that's a fun part of the swashbuckling adventure too. Is like I feel like it covers a lot of ground, a lot of territory, and there's like almost like a insert your own kind of like what we were talking about. Like you kind of see the worlds and you're like, what would I want to live in? What worlds would I want to live in? And this is the more fantastical of the three, I'd say. So like this is definitely the one I would choose to live in as well. Like if I had to just like step into a film and just partake in the action and the swashbuckling of it all, this is the one I would choose because it's a more fantastical one. It's a more interesting world, and I love books. So I don't read books a
Uh,
lot, but the ones I have, I like.
right. No, me too. This is the one that I would want to
Yeah.
step into. The other ones don't have electricity. But the one last thing about this is that when I was a kid, there was I had this video game, the
Mm.
Pagemaster video game on Sega
Whoa.
Genesis,
Wow.
and there's like a few levels per genre. Like you have a few levels in horror, and then you move on to adventure, and a few levels there, and then there's a few levels in fantasy, and then you beat the game. But there's a couple of sound clips from that, um, from the movie and the video game that are ingrained in my brain because of the video game, which is one of the things when you're going through the levels. An optional thing is to find his library card in
Oh.
each level, and so every time you would come across it, he would say, "My library card," and so that is just ingrained in my brain forever. Him saying, "My
Yeah.
library card," and then when he would come to the exit, he would say, "It's the exit," and then you would, and so yeah, so those things are always in my brain. But what's funny is that like while it was based in those things, there was almost nothing that happened in the game was actually from the movie.
Mhm.
You would have like googly eye, like gooey eyes that you could throw at people in horror, and I don't know. There was a lot of it, but it was fun and I loved it. And now that I'm talking about it, I really want to play it again.
Yes.
All right, so let's move on to our next movie in reverse chronological order, which is The Three Musketeers from
Hmm.
1993. All right.
Set the scene for us here, Matt.
Okay, so this is probably another one we probably got from Columbia House. I don't know for sure how we
Mm.
got this movie, but I owned it as well. Um, this one was from Disney, so it did come in the clamshell, the white clamshell VHS
Yes.
case. Um, there, I know for a fact that this is that I remember seeing commercial the trailers for this. I used to watch the trailers on the VHS tapes all the time. That's how I knew about movies. There are some movies that I feel like I've seen because I saw the trailers so many times as a kid because I'd watch these VHS tapes but like I haven't seen it, but I feel like I have because I watched the trailers so often. This is one that I used to see the trailer for a lot
Mhm.
on one of my VHS tapes. So when it came out, naturally I got it. There's not a big story about it. I saw the trailer so often that I really wanted to watch it, and so purchased it. This was kind of big back when I was a kid. It was basically everybody had seen it, at least that I knew. And Chris O'Donnell, I don't think was super famous yet. He'd been in a few things. I could probably look it up and see what he hadn't been Robin yet.
Right.
He would be in a couple years be Robin in Batman. Oliver Platt I had seen in plenty of stuff, and I always loved him.
Mm-hmm.
Kiefer Sutherland I recognize because he was a star in the 80s. And he's in the movie Flatliners, which my mom watched a lot, and my sister always got the names of the actors wrong in it. I didn't know anything about Charlie Sheen at the time. Which is fine.
Very different from my viewing experience, where I know more about Charlie Sheen than the other three, the other four, or three, which is always a question I had. I mean, sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
I've always thought it was weird that they call it the Three Musketeers when it's clearly four. I know the whole premise is like the one isn't part of it yet, and he's interacting with Three Musketeers, but it's always been like one of those like OCD moments where I'm like, I mean, there's four of them. Like there's four leads. Like they're the four Musketeers. I know he's not really there yet. I don't know. It always bothered me.
It's not even that he's not a Musketeer yet. It's that it's about the Three Musketeers that did not that did not stop being Musketeers when they were told to. So that's really who the Three Musketeers are. It's not it's not necessarily three of the four characters are Musketeers. It's that those three specifically did not abandon their duty.
Right. But it's also about the other guy. So I'm like,
it is. D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers.
Right. Like, but I guess that doesn't have a good enough flow, and people.
I'm sure you'll cover it on Picture This, but I'm pretty sure Three Musketeers and Four Musketeers were nominated for Best Picture back to back.
Oh, wow!
Like in the next year, the year after Three Musketeers was nominated for Best Picture, Four Musketeers was nominated for Best
Interesting.
Picture. I think, if I'm remembering my Oscar,
I can fact check you in like 35 seconds. But continue talking about your experience with Three Musketeers.
So, there's not really much to say about my experience with this, except that I got it and watched it, and I used to watch it all the time. The person that I knew best out of this from this movie was, actually there were two people that I knew really well from this movie. One of them was Tim Curry because he was in Annie, and we owned Annie, and I watched Annie all the time too. So Tim Curry was the person that I knew most from this movie. The other person is oh Jesus, why did I just forget his name?
Michael Wincott.
Michael Wincott. For reasons we'll talk about in the next movie.
Yes, I can't find the Oscar stat, but I'm sure you're right. I just it's too much scrolling for my brain right now, and I want to hear what you have to say. So. You knew Tim Curry and Michael Wincott. Michael Wincott for obvious reasons.
I didn't know Michael Wincott by name, but
you knew
there were obvious reasons I did know him. Yeah,
right. Like, I know that face.
That's the same character. It just went down an eye. So yeah, I used to watch this all the time. I really loved the different personalities that each of the Three Musketeers had, and the way that they were played. I really, there's something about the characterization within this movie. This movie is so 90s. It's so
Disney 90s. You know what I mean?
It's so
like,
Disney 90s, exactly.
Yes, and I want to just say this is a good kind of branching off point from there, though. But like, there was a lot of talk in our Discord area about the idea that it was like at one point it wanted to be a Disney movie, at another point Tim Curry's talking about fucking some woman. Like, and I think Chad said that directly, but like it is very much like that. It's like, when you're a Disney movie, you can only go as far as you want to go, but also because you're a live action Disney movie, you can go further than the animated. And I think that's kind of a weird kind of gray area that it kind of lives in, that a lot of movies of that time lived in, that Pirates kind of mastered. But like this very much feels like a kind of prototype for Pirates a decade later, like very much trying to figure out, okay, where's the line that we can cross? When do we cross it? Can we cross it? Is it as effective if we can't cross it, type thing? You know, because I think that a lot of it, because it's Disney, doesn't have its full effect in terms of what you can do with like the violence and the action, but at the same time, it adds a nice kind of softness and nostalgic feel to it, because I think a lot of the
Right.
nostalgia comes from the charm of the Disney of it all.
Right. And the I think that that's part of the appeal to me as well, even as a kid. Like in 1993, I'm 9 years old. I'm about to
Mhm,
turn 10. So like there's this appeal that it doesn't feel childish,
mhm,
but it feels like it's the right age for me. Like
mhm,
so yeah, there's definitely an appeal uh to me for that. But yeah, the adventure for a kid my age was just it was so fun.
mhm.
It was funny. Um, you kind of identified with as a kid. You kind of identified with D'Artagnan. You're like, yes, I too am brave, D'Artagnan. I can also become uh, a, uh, a musketeer. But no, there was just there's something about the adventure of it all, and there's a similarity between this and Prince of Thieves, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, that probably made this movie more appealing to me because of how I felt about Prince of Thieves, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Mm.
But there, I don't know. This movie just I used to watch it a lot. The There's also and I think we don't need to talk about this necessarily right now because it kind of ties into something with Prince of Thieves as well. But there's a Bryan Adams song. Bryan Adams, Rod Stewart, and Sting collaborated to do a song in this, and I miss the times. I miss the days
Right.
when which we still do original songs, but
They very much feel tonally, consistent with the movie nowadays, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, and it's they made a song for a movie, they made a music video, they put it on the VHS tape. In this case, I believe that the video was before the movie because it doesn't have clips from the movie in it.
Mm,
So like they did that, they put this song before the movie in the VHS tape, and then the score throughout has samples from this song, which may be the other way around. This song probably samples the
yeah,
score,
yeah.
but you hear it throughout. And if you're watching the VHS tape, you watch that music video, you heard the song, then you hear it throughout the movie.
Right.
Those
It's like a
little
My Heart Will
notes.
Go On thing. It's like you
Yeah,
just keep hearing it throughout Titanic. Yeah, but I
right.
think I'd say that does it a little bit better, but yeah, like I know what you mean. It's
Oh,
that
it
effect.
does it better for sure. That I mean, we're
I don't mean to diss on this, but
I'm not claiming that Three Musketeers is as good as Titanic or anything.
no.
But
I agree. I don't think
Prince
it's
of
as good.
Thieves also does it with everything I do it for you
Mhm.
throughout the movie, especially between Marion
Yeah,
and
the
Robin. You'll
love
hear
theme. Yeah.
those notes
Do
from
do do do
the
do
song.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So they both kind of do that a lot. But there was a time when an original song almost meant something. Today, either the original song is sang, like if an original song is going to get traction, it's sang by somebody in the movie, or it gets nominated and you're like, and you listen to it and you're like, I don't know what that had to do with the movie, but
Mhm.
it's cool that
Yeah.
it's
Well, that's
cool
why
that Diane
Barbie is
Warren gets
yeah.
another
Yeah,
Oscar
that's why
nomination.
Barbie is so well respected now too, because it's like you
Right.
have the song where it's like diegetically in the movie, it's like I'm just
Mhm.
Ken singing the song, but then What Was I Made For is also part of a very pivotal part of the movie with the montage, and it actually has something to say. And the
Right.
music video is very much like Billie Eilish playing with dolls. Like it's very
Right.
reminiscent of the movie. So like I think
Well,
we could see
that's
a
one of the things.
resurgence of that, you know.
Yeah, that's one of the things about Barbie that I really loved is there was an aspect of it that felt like, I mean, obviously Greta Gerwig is close to my age. I don't know her
Mm.
exact age, but I
Oh,
feel
you
like
think Three Musketeers inspired Barbie?
no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Greta Gerwig grew
Uh,
up with the same types of movies
no,
I
I know.
did. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
around this time I used to watch Little Women all the time.
Hmm.
The
Right.
1994 version
I'm
of
sure
Little
she
Women,
did too. Yeah.
all the time. I'm sure she did too. Like
Yeah.
I could feel that when I watch it. Like
Yeah,
it
and you
feels
can hear
like
the Billie Eilish stuff throughout the movie too. Like when I
right, exactly.
rewatched it, it was honestly harder to focus on the movie itself because I was hearing the song and I was like, "Oh, wait, that's the Billie Eilish." And I was like, "Wait, I forget it's like from this movie first and foremost." It's kind of like that.
Right.
Same with
And
like
that's
Avatar with the song "I See You." I like hear it in the theme, like the da 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 da. I'm like, that's the song, but I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know it was a song. Now I know it's a song. I can't hear it on the, like it's kind of the same thing."
right, exactly. Well, and I think that's what you're gonna. I think I think you're right that there might be a resurgence of that because I feel like a lot of the elder millennials, which is what I am, um, meaning that we are the oldest of the millennials. We were kind of raised like Gen Xers, but then one day they told us, "No, you're a millennial."
Hmm.
Uh, so, like, I think that a lot of the elder millennials are now like becoming the big filmmakers, and I think that
Right.
a lot of what I grew up with is probably is starting to influence a lot of
Oh yeah.
what they. There's a lot, you know. Film has always been cyclical. Like you things come back around. It all has to do with what inspired us, and I think
Hmm.
a lot of people who are making big movies right now were inspired by the same stuff I was inspired by.
Absolutely.
So that's really
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, and like I said, like this feels like it also inspired just other swashbuckling films of this
Hmm.
kind because it is Disney also because like Disney got to kind of borrow from it with like
Hmm.
Pirates, and I think Pirates kind of perfected this formula. Like a
Hmm.
little bit of insight, as I said earlier, I'm not the biggest swashbuckling fan except for like the Pirates movies. I've just never really grasped onto it, and that's kind of a lot of the other films of the kind, like the kind of costume drama war films. Like I had no interest to see Napoleon in the theaters because it just like I knew it probably wasn't going to be my thing, and I will watch it because it's nominated for an Oscar now, but like that,
Hmm.
like Mary Queen of Scots, like all these movies where I'm like, I know people probably love this, but I personally can't get into it. And these are much more, adventure than
Hmm.
history, which helps. But even that, it's like the history is what I'm not as interested in.
Hmm.
And there was a lot of talk actually in the comments about like the idea of the politics and the history of it all and the French, kind of government. The idea that Chad posed this question. So the Musketeers fight for justice, but they kill people. And it was like this whole conversation in the Discord about, the idea of, well, it's France and this was the government at the time. And then Chad obviously said, like, well, I'm not French and I don't stand for this government. So like it makes sense. So like it is very political. And I think if you're not necessarily into all that and you're only in it for like the adventure and the characters, I think this does it well at times. But I feel like just the longer some of these films get, the more it's like there are parts where I could just skip over because I'm not as invested in the actual like
Hmm.
setting of the time. But it's also I've never been into that, so it's not like a criticism on this film itself. That was the same with Pirates. There were moments like when the guys with the white wigs are talking, I'm like, no, just give me the swords.
Hmm.
But I know that's kind of a naive, very childish side of my brain speaking. But I probably would have liked this a lot because when I was a kid, I had a tendency to like hone in on certain aspects and forget about the others. Like
Right.
I'm trying to think of, when Chad and I did picture this for the Alamo, I was like, oh, the Alamo's so great, so great, and I'm watching it back, I'm like, I don't remember all these scenes. It's because I really kind of fixated on the last 20 minutes when I was a kid, and I watched the last 20 minutes over and over and over again. And I think
Right.
that's the thing sometimes too, is like with nostalgia, it's like we cling on to certain scenes that we're like, oh yeah, that movie was great because of that scene. But then you watch the film, and you're like, all these other parts that like I just must have either skipped past as a kid or just not really like liked, or maybe I just didn't need to like it because I like the other stuff. I don't know. But I feel like this kind of
Hmm.
has that idea of like, I think there are moments in this where as a kid I would have really liked it, especially all the action and the sword fighting, because who doesn't like that
Right.
as a kid?
Right.
Whereas the other stuff is where I'm kind of like, okay, and I just wish I was a little bit more into it, a little bit more into the characters. I personally don't find Chris O'Donnell that good in it, and I think that kind of detracts it from me as well. But the other three are very good, so like it kind of
Right.
balances it out there. So where again, I'm like, if it's about the Three Musketeers, let it be about the Three Musketeers. I don't care about this other guy, but I also get
Right.
what you were saying, where it's like you want to be a hero, you want to be brave like him. So it's like that
Hmm.
kind of thing where when you're a kid, you maybe like that character more. Hence why I like Anakin Skywalker in the prequels because I
Right.
was a kid when I was like rooting for the Jedi, So
Exactly. Well, like, there's the thing. Like, he's not very good in this movie. I agree with you there.
it's a very Hayden
But
Christensen thing. Yeah.
when you're a kid, you're like, he's the cipher. Like, that's the representation of me in this film.
Hmm.
Um. So I always respected that role and really liked it. But the other three are definitely like their characters are so good. Like they play them so well. I'd like to talk about those characters. Which of the Musketeers was your favorite?
Oliver Platt's character. I can't remember his name,
Obviously,
but yeah,
Porthos is his name.
and I think that's kind of the obvious one,
Right,
personally. But like, yeah, just for like, I'm also an actor. I also am a character actor. So like, he just has that kind of character. He's like got that Gimli feel for some reason. It's
right,
just like the kind of a slightly more theatrical than the others. He's not trying to be brooding or charming. He's just trying to like have fun and really embody the spirit of the character, which I appreciate.
right. As a overweight kid who relied on his comedic chops, I was all about Porthos when I was a kid. Like that was my guy. I was like,
Right.
yes, I love this guy. He's so good. Um, I think that, but yeah, he's obviously the best. I think they balance each other really well. It's fun seeing them kind of interact with each other throughout the movie. That's always fun. Now, you posed a question
Hmm.
that I'm not sure if we got many answers on, but I would like us to answer that
Mm.
question, and that is if they were to remake this movie.
Yes, we got one answer. Yeah.
So your question was kind of like if they were to remake this movie, who would play the roles? Alan did
Point
kind of
out.
take you to task
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
little
He was
bit.
like, it has been remade several times, but I didn't even realize that because I feel like they weren't
Yeah,
mainstream. Like you
yeah.
weren't getting big stars in these roles. You know what I mean?
Right. So they haven't made a mention. So I want to kind of bend that a little bit, and it's not just that we're remaking Alexander Dumas's book. If that's his name that I've just forgotten, is that his name? Did I just say it right or wrong?
I have no idea.
I don't
You would know better than I do.
know. Anyway, we're not just remaking the book. We're not adapting the book again. We are remaking the characterizations present in this movie. We are remaking it. Accents be damned, because we didn't care about accents in the 90s. Okay. That's why. Okay. So we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but
I'll talk about it with
it's
the next
present in
movie
this,
mostly.
well,
Yeah.
it's present in this movie. But I do need to mention, when we discuss movies and you're like, Shailene Woodley, her it's barely an accent. I'm like, it was fine. You can see why it was fine for me. When I was coming up, accents didn't mean anything. You could enjoy a movie. It didn't matter what the accents were doing.
Right.
So anyway, so I would like to narrow it to us. We are remaking this movie with these characterizations.
Mm.
Very 90s. Accents don't matter.
Mm.
So who would you cast as D'Artagnan?
I haven't like thought this through, so I'm like trying to scroll through actors. I I don't necessarily know who I'd cast where, but like
I feel like there's an obvious answer for D'Artagnan.
I mean Timothy Chalamet, but like
Obviously,
he's
yeah.
in everything. I don't know if I want
He
to
is
put
in
him.
everything.
Yeah, you're
So while Timothy Chalamet is the obvious answer, and I think it's probably who I would cast, I would like to present an alternate
okay.
take on
I have an
D'Artagnan.
alternate as well now. Yes.
I had a couple the other day, but this is the only one that's coming to mind right now, which is Mike Feist.
Okay, good choice.
Yeah,
I feel
think
like
he
you
could
need
do
that kind of like skinny white boy energy,
it. Yeah,
and that's why I would go with Gabriel LaBelle from The Fablemans. I think he'd
nice.
be a great fit. I think he'd be a
He
cool
would.
fit. Yes.
He would be great. Okay,
Or
so then
Jack
we've got.
Champion from Avatar. It would be very good as well. He was in the Scream, the
Yeah,
new Scream. He'd be good as well.
yeah, he was good.
All right, now they're flowing. Let's go.
All right. So then we've got the Three Musketeers: Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. Let's start with Athos, which was Kiefer Sutherland.
Oh, okay. I have a name.
Okay.
Glenn Powell.
Okay.
I don't know which one he would be, but like he kind of fits that one best. I don't know. Maybe it's the blonde hair coordination. I just think he's the biggest movie. It has the potential to be the biggest movie star right now, and I would love to see him in like one of these movies. But I don't know if he would be right for that part. I don't know.
Okay. So when I was thinking about this, I had an actor in mind for Aramis, but then I decided while I was watching the movie that I think he would be better as Athos, and that is Idris Elba.
Oh, so you're thinking older then? Yeah. Okay,
I mean, a
like
little
that.
bit older, and like
Yeah. Because I mean, he's the young one with the older crowd. Okay, if we're looking at that lens, yeah, like I like that a lot.
Okay, so what about Aramis, the religious, religious Casanova character?
That's Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, Charlie Sheen.
Oh gosh, this is tough.
See, originally I was going to put Idris Elba in that role, but I decided no, I think he's better as the intense uh drunk guy.
Hmm. I don't know, man. This is tough. Do
Andrew
you have a
Scott.
name?
Andrew Scott.
Oh, Andrew Scott would be great. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking like maybe like Aaron Taylor Johnson, but I was like, I don't know about that.
I have a thing about Aaron Taylor Johnson. So
Okay.
he's not in my
All
movie.
right. Okay.
But
Yeah, I
but
don't
yeah,
know.
I think Andrew Scott would be
Yeah, that's a good pick.
Aramis.
Maybe like a
And
Ben
then
Whishaw too would be really good. Yeah, maybe
oh
not.
yeah.
I don't know what he'd be. That's the thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is
How
tough,
about
man.
all right.
I wish I had like a day to prep this, but I don't.
Well, I mean, you did pose the question. I thought you'd have
Right.
answers.
No,
Uh,
I was hoping other people would give me answers, so I didn't have to answer it. Because I don't know.
all
All
right,
right.
so we're not going to go through the whole cast then, but we will do the final Musketeer, which is Porthos. That's Oliver Platt.
Okay.
For me, I think that there's a compulsion to go with the fat funny guy, and to go with someone like Bobby Moynihan or someone like that. But I don't think that's right. I think you need a more theatrical person who's also funny and stockier. I don't think you go with the comedian necessarily.
David Harbour? No.
David Harbour's not bad.
Thank you. That goes right off the top.
That's not bad.
Going
That's
through my
pretty
Letterboxd, like just being like, what movie? What popping out here?
David Harbour's not terrible. He would fit the kind of age thing that we have going. Also, like the little bit older.
I know who I want to play Tim Curry.
Who do you want to play Tim Curry?
You need a very kind of just commanding presence. Being gay helps. Coleman Domingo.
Oh, of course.
It would
Yes.
be so good.
Also, I'm so happy for him right now.
Yeah.
So
he's having a
that's
moment. I don't know with Oliver Platt's character. Who else I put? Maybe like Jeffrey Wright. Is that too old? I don't know.
I think that he's. I don't know. I think he might be a little bit like serious.
Yeah, you're right.
But maybe.
I'm just looking at posters. I have no idea. Hell, put Peter Dinklage in there.
Oh, that would be good. Yeah,
that'd be really good. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
It's good stuff.
Anyway, we should probably go. Oh, you know who I would love to see in that role?
What's
Who's having a little bit of a moment right now, like kind of a resurgence. Is what's his name? David Krumholtz. But I feel like that's kind of a bygone. I don't know. I'm just looking through the Oppenheimer cast now, and I'm like, oh, this would be great.
Oh, for that matter, let's put Benny Safdie in there.
You know what? Let's just have them all audition, and then we'll pick our one or our three, I guess, or four. Yeah. I mean, Adam Driver's playing Michael Wincott for me.
Of course.
Just because they look like him, you know. Yeah. I mean, you could cast Ewan McGregor as Kiefer Sutherland. Is he too old? Because like the whole thing is that Kiefer Sutherland looks just like Obi-Wan. Chris O'Donnell looks like Anakin, and Michael Wincott in this looks like Adam Driver in their Star Wars garb, like because it's got the long hair and the beards. I don't know.
I can see that.
Let's continue though. I mean, do you have any other casting? Like,
no, we're good there. I just kind of wanted to.
Yeah, but Alan did throw out the Timothy Chalamet name, which was kind of a good choice, obviously. I'm trying to see if there's any other comments though about this one in particular. Just a lot of people kind of questioning why it's so dark and sexy for Disney, but then when I was watching this, I was like, it felt like it was holding back because it was Disney. So like, I guess we're just kind of different point of views there. It's very weird to see Kiefer with a beard. A lot of this negative stuff is from Chad, which I appreciate. You know, he's always got this hot takes type of shit that inspired Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm sure, yes, Chad, it very much was. Yeah, no, it's very 90s. Alan says, yes, it's very 90s. I mean, like, yeah, kind of the same thing we've been kind of talking about over and over.
Right.
Yeah, and Alan kind of went on to talk about like the complexity of the politics stuff of how they still do kill, even though they're supposed to be good in Musketeers. Which I'll just say right now, if anyone's like saying, "Oh, they're not heroic, they kill," Iron Man literally became a weapon of mass destruction in Endgame to take out all of Thanos' army with a snap. Okay, he did basically the same thing Thanos did, just to Thanos' army, but because he's the good guy, we all cheered for him. But technically, he literally blew himself up in the process. He became the one thing he hated, which was mass destruction. So that's my argument to that. And we still love Iron Man. We still grieved him, but like, come on, he became his own weapon of mass destruction. You can't argue against it. The only pacifist superhero in the Marvel universe right now is probably Spider-Man because he refused to hurt the villains. But like every other hero in the MCU is killed. Like, come on, even Cap. So I don't know if Cap has actually. I don't know, but like that's kind of my argument to that is like, yes, there's a line heroes cross, but like a lot of superheroes kill. and that's just
Did you
kind of
say? Did you say I don't know if Captain America, the war hero, killed people?
no, but like in a well, that's the thing. Like it's like not in a bad way because he's the hero, but yeah, he killed Nazis and stuff. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of I'm just thinking of the comment of like if there are heroes, why do they kill? But I'm like,
Right.
I feel like everyone
Well,
but
and
Tom Holland, Spider Man, the MCU does that. You know, DC they all kill. I mean,
well, they shouldn't. But
right?
as a okay, let me just say this: as a humanist, a pacifist, and a Batman fan,
Yeah,
heroes don't have to kill. Batman shouldn't kill. I hate that's the thing. That's one of the
right.
main things I hate about the DCU. However, that doesn't mean that just because someone kills means that they aren't heroes, especially when you
Right.
are going with something that is obviously meant to be a comedy or have these comedic moments.
Yeah.
Most of
I mean, look at
their
John Wick too. I mean, like that's one of he's got the biggest body count of anyone. You know.
right. The I assume that when they're talking about but they kill, they're not talking about they killed him during sword fights. I'm sure they're talking about they walked into that bar, that's that pub, and all of the guards were dead around
Mm,
her. I assume that's the kind of thing they're talking
right.
about, like just like. But yeah, it's a different time. Like that's what you did.
Mm,
If you got into a duel, you killed the other person. Like that's just so it's different. I don't think we necessarily judge them on that
right.
because it's a swashbuckling movie. They
Right. And also it's like a lot of it's I mean, a lot of it is self-defense in a way. Like that's
Mhm.
the John Wick thing. It's like they killed his dog. He has a purpose and a reason. Like, should he still be killing? Maybe not excessively, but like they're all coming at him. You know, they're trying to get him. So it's like more like a self-defense thing. It's like, yeah, there's a very complicated, more like further discussion you could have on like just
Mhm.
heroes who kill in general. But I feel like most of the time they're either in self-defense or they're not really heroes, or it's like you said, more in a more like kind of swashbuckling comedic feel, and it's also based on classic literature. I'm like, you know, like these are criticisms that you could have with the source material, not necessarily this
Right.
film. You know, this is just
Right.
adapting that. You know,
Exactly. Uh, on behalf of the Dopico Movie Network, I would like to uh, put a disclaimer here that we at the Dopico Movie Network do not think that killing people is
no,
self-defense for
no,
a
no, no,
dog that is already dead. Uh,
no. No, it's more of the bounty of it all. Like they're all running
yeah.
at him. He's gonna obviously fight back, you know, type thing. But anyway, that's a longer discussion for another time. Is there anything else on Three Musketeers though?
No, I'd like to get
Robin Hood, yeah,
to
yeah,
for me the piece de resistance.
yes.
This
And
is the movie.
I want to open with just this because this is kind of what I was gonna say with Three Musketeers, but I held it for here. I think a lot of people who were watching these movies for the first time for this, a lot of people who like follow along with our show, a lot of the people who watched Robin Hood first and then watched Three Musketeers, because Robin Hood did come out first, thought Three Musketeers was a little too samey of Robin Hood, like it almost borrowed
Mhm.
too much. I watched Three Musketeers first, so my reaction to Robin Hood was, I feel like I just saw this in Three Musketeers, but now looking at it as, oh, this came out first, switch that, reverse it type thing, because it has the pop song, it has a swashbuckle feel, it's pretty long, it's got some iffy accents, some iffy performances, like that's the thing. They do feel very similar, but they are very different. But I just wanted to give that little asterisk because I did
Mm.
watch them in, I guess, maybe the wrong order. To where it's like I feel like if I'd watched Robin Hood first, I would have had the same thoughts on Robin Hood as I did Three Musketeers, and if I watched Three Musketeers after, I might have been a little lower on that. Because right now, where I hold these two, I like Three Musketeers more, but I think it's because I saw it first. You know, and that's the thing. No, I know, and I know the face, the face says it all right there. So I really think the viewing order might be a little to blame because a lot of comments about Three Musketeers were also about how it was like this just copied Men in Tights or sorry, a Prince of Thieves and didn't do it as well. And I'm like, oh yeah, maybe, but like I saw it first, so like how can I judge that? Because you know, so that's my one disclaimer I'll put out there. So like if I were to watch these in a different order, I'd probably just like reverse my exact criticisms, kind of. Um, but you know,
This is disappointing because I read your Three Musketeers Letterboxd review. I haven't read this one, and so I was hoping that this one will be better. So that's good. That's really disappointing to me
no,
that you liked
but
that one better, and
and I
I've
think
read
that's
that, and then that was not a good
no, but that's the
review.
spirit. That's the spirit of, and I give it 2.5 stars, which is for me like it's a C. It's average. It's the staple. You know, like that's the thing is like I think when we're talking about nostalgia, I mean like obviously these ones aren't gonna necessarily hit me as profoundly
Mhm.
as you, just because I'm looking at them at a totally different lens. And I think if I were to grow up with, and that's the thing with all these films, I can agree. All these films, if I'd watched this as a kid, I would have liked more
Right,
than I do now.
right.
And I think that's kind of to say, you know, part to say about it. But I'd love to hear what you have to say about it because obviously you do love this one.
I do love this film. This is my number one of these movies. I've seen this one more than any of them. I've seen it so many times. The fact that I can quote all three of these movies basically start to finish, but
I love that.
this one the most. This one
Mm.
has there are hallmarks in my brain that will forever be there from this movie, and there's just something that this is okay. Me, this was my first ever Alan Rickman movie.
Oh, cool.
This was because I didn't care about Die Hard yet. Like
Right.
this was the first. This was, to me, this is where he's from. This
Right.
is where Alan Rickman
Kind of
comes
like
from.
how I see him as Snape, even though he'd done so much before that. Yeah,
Right, exactly. So this is my first Alan Rickman movie, and so this is where I was introduced to him as a villain. And to me, although I think that Hans Gruber is his best role, and I think I think that that's the best villain character he's played. To me, this is the most sinister, just worst, like the villain, like the
Mhm.
baddest villain that he's
Right,
ever
because he
played.
doesn't have any sort of redeeming or charming qualities.
Right.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I was saying earlier too. It's like I have seen Die Hard and Snape, so it's like I'm judging it at a slightly different, and Sweeney Todd. So I'm like judging it at a slightly different lens to where it wasn't, this big like discovery for me of him either. But I still think he's great. I mean, he's amazing in
Right.
this. He's the best part of this, I think, in terms of the acting for sure.
Oh. So yeah, I don't for this one I don't remember how I saw it first. I'm sure my mom bought it and then I watched it and it was and then I loved it and watched it again the next day and then watched it forever.
Mhm.
Um there is, how sometimes, and I hate this when people say it, but sometimes I understand it. You know how sometimes people say things like they don't make movies like they used to.
They don't make
They
like this.
I, and I hate it when they say that because on many levels they make movies way better than they used to now. Like
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like
I mean,
they
just
make
technologically speaking, yeah.
not
I
even
mean, yeah,
technologically, like the themes that we are exploring and the honesty and and the way that we talk about
representation, yeah.
things, representation. There are things about film that are better now than they have ever been. And I'm not saying that that's not the case or that this is doing anything better than they've ever done, but they don't make films like this anymore. And what I mean by that is that they don't make movies, they don't make action adventure movies that care about things like the cinematography and the set direction and the staging and all of that the way that the movies around this time cared about them. Yes, people still care about it. You look at John Wick, yes, there's a lot of stylization and that they care about it then. But a movie like this did not have to have a scene where he's shooting a fiery arrow while the barrels of gunpowder are blowing up behind him. Like that's an incredible shot.
Yeah.
One of my favorite shots that ever has happened. There's so many incredible shots in this movie that you wouldn't see today in a common variety action movie,
Mhm.
unless because they're the only way they're going to do anything in those type of movies is to be more stylized and to give it a certain that John Wick
Yeah.
type of feel.
Yeah.
They're not going to frame it and give it and film it like like a a piece of art the way that they used to back then,
Mhm.
because incredible cinematographers this is where they worked before they started working on art pictures and stuff like that. Like that's
Yeah.
that's just kind of the way that this movie has a feel about it that you just don't
Yeah,
get anymore.
I'll agree with you there. I think the technical elements of this film are
Mhm.
very strong. The sets, the costumes, the action staging, and all that. For me, it's really just the dialogue and characters that like for me drags it down, and the length and pacing. But I agree, like the actual like bare bones technical elements of this are really impressive and make it feel very spiritual to its successors or predecessors. I would say, which one's
Mhm.
which predecessors. Because another thing is also like I have seen so many versions of Robin Hood at this point. And I feel like if you're a kid and this is your first version of Robin Hood, this is going to be your version. Just like when I watched the Disney one for the first time, that was my version, and Errol Flynn's is like my all-time favorite version, to where like everything else pales in comparison. But I think that's also unfair of me, because it's like, why can't they all be great? Like, why do we have to
Right.
compare them necessarily? But then I'm also the one who's like, why do we need another Mean Girls and Harry Potter? We just had those, right? It was only 20
Yeah.
years. But I get it. I get why people are upset, but I'm also getting why people are excited, because there are sometimes iterations of stories that have multiple good versions of them.
Right.
And I think Robin Hood's one that is remade so much. And I asked this question in the Discord, and I didn't really get much of a response. But why do they keep remaking the same stories over and over again? And I think Alan did respond to it. I think he said something along the lines of, okay, Adam said, not a devoted fan, but there's certainly a charm to them that makes them more entertainment compared to more modern adventure stories. I think the camaraderie is a selling point, because the joy is seeing a huge ensemble cast have fun and given the opportunity to show personality to define their character. I definitely found plot-wise something like Prince of Thieves and Three Musketeers kind of the same, but the former embraces more over-the-top action and epicness that Musketeers felt a little restrained in because of its Disney. So yeah, like that's kind of the exact idea. Like I feel like they make these over and over again because of, you know, they're kind of universal stories that you can put your spins on, that will still feel true to the source material while also allowing someone to be creative and free. Whereas some stories don't allow that. Like there's only so much you can do with certain fairy tales, but like this one really allows for some change. And this one is very different than a lot of other versions, which I appreciate for sure.
Right. Well, and I think that there's also a thing about the themes of these movies being relevant today, and almost like you can get away with making a new Robin Hood movie today, but if you made a modern day original film about redistributing about stealing from billionaires and redistributing the wealth, there would be there would be an obvious political divide on
Right, but because you're putting it in this lens, it doesn't feel like it is modern, even though it is,
it. Right.
And I
Exactly.
agree with that. Yeah, but yeah, that's just where I'm coming from as a Robin Hood fan. I'm like, I once you've seen the Errol Flynn version, the Fox version from Disney, it's like for me that's like the pinnacle. And if it's not going
Mhm.
to hit that bar, it always just looks lesser in comparison. But I think I am being unfair in that respect, because I do think I should judge this as its own film. And I think you brought up so many good reasons as to why it is so good, just from the
Mhm.
visual and the way it's made and all that. So yeah, I definitely
Right.
feel like I was a little harsh on this.
Well, and my first version of Robin Hood was obviously the Disney Fox
Oh,
version.
okay.
Like that's my first version. Like
Right.
that already existed. I had seen it, and it's good, and I do very much enjoy that. And I think that this movie even like homages it in a few places, having him split an arrow in twain, which I mean I think is pretty standard with a Robin Hood. But there's certain things that I feel like there are little homages to that, but that was my first version. I hadn't seen Errol Flynn version yet at this point, so this was my definitive live action version.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the thing that you saw, I think there's something that we did see in the Discord when people were talking about this movie, is that people that grew up with this movie still love it unabashedly.
Right.
People
Yeah.
who saw it for the first time maybe had some of the extra warranted criticisms that
Right.
and I and I get it, and there are criticisms to be had. Kevin Costner attempts an English accent
Yeah.
and then abandons it.
Yeah,
Like
I think he's pretty rough in this role, but that's also like, I take certain things into account a little too seriously sometimes, like accents, where I'm like, if I could just throw that out the window, maybe I would like the performance more. I've just never really gotten the Kevin Costner hype, because also Dan, I said the same with Dances with the Wolves, and Chad and Dan both kind of like scolded me there. I was like, I just don't get the Kevin Costner hype in the '90s. I wasn't there. I don't understand it. My favorite performance of his is Hidden Figures, and that's the one everyone hates. So I'm like, I don't know.
all right, yeah, we talked about him in the episode of I think that's what I was on, because it's Field of Dreams.
Oh, he's very good
So
in that too. Yes. Okay, so
yeah,
maybe I do. No, but that's the thing is like maybe I like him more as the just like the kind of good old average Joe than I do like the action hero, or the guy going into the Indian tribe or the Native American tribe, like that kind of like
here's the
you know.
secret, and once you know this, you will be. I think you'll be able to appreciate him in
Okay,
any role,
please help
which
me.
is that,
Yeah.
and this is important. They're all the same role. He's not a good actor.
Okay,
He
so
is
I'm
good.
warranted.
He is good at that role. And if you know that, you could just go into every movie thinking, oh, this is just Kevin Costner being good at that role. He's good at that one role. They're all the same role. That's why. The thing is, I grew up knowing that. So this does nothing to. So that does nothing to detract from this. I like him in this movie, but that's because he's always been Robin Hood to me. Like so. But yeah, the lack of accents doesn't bother me at all. And I think that's clear. Like Three Musketeers, same thing. They didn't bother themselves in the 90s. We didn't bother ourselves with accents.
Right.
Honestly, if they tried those accents, it would have been a lesser movie. Look at Shailene Woodley in Ferrari. It's just we didn't care back then. And if you can get past that, I think there are performances in it that in both movies that are a lot of fun. I think that this movie in particular has more people trying it. Even friggin' Will Scarlet, what's his name? Christian Slater. Even he's doing an English accent. Most of the people are. I think that the side characters in this movie are also all really good. Bull, he's very funny. Wolf, that kid, the Little John's kid, Little John himself. Like, there's a lot of. I think that one place where this movie succeeds is that it makes you care about the merry men, the people in the forest that he's with, enough that when the attacks happen, you care and you feel it, and you want everything to work out for these people, and you understand why this is all happening to him and why he's going after the people who are oppressing him. Another, which we can, if you have an opinion on that, I have other places where I think this movie succeeds. But
keep going, because I do really want to hear this, because like I was trying so hard to like it. And I think it also is just, it's a very long movie, so like some of the pacing dragged for me. But I'm like, I wanted to like it so much because I know so many people of like your generation love it so much. And I grew up just always hearing of it as the bad one with the bad accents. But then meeting people of an older generation, I'm like, oh, people love this. So it's a real generational thing, because people of my generation hate this, and I really want to like try to find that gap because I want to love it very much.
Well, a thing that it does really well that I think was not always handled so well in the 90s, and I think that it's not perfect by any means. It doesn't do this perfectly, but what it does do is it has themes of inclusivity that I think you weren't really finding a lot of back then done quite as well.
With like the Morgan Freeman stuff?
Morgan Freeman stuff. People seeing their differences and growing to love each other in spite of those. Like the Morgan Freeman thing, people say some nasty things to him, but by the end, basically everybody, like, by the end, everybody's made friends with him. Everybody is
right. He's one of the team. Yeah.
He's one of the team, and it does not take anybody long to get there. Like there's a point where Friar Tuck is like, if you let him touch her, he's going to kill her. He saves Little John's wife and baby. Friar Tuck is immediately like, let's go try to convert each other. Let's go have a drink and convert each other.
Right.
There are parts that are unfortunately pretty historically accurate when it comes to the discrimination that he receives, but there's something that is progressive even for the 90s, not to mention 800 years before.
Right.
That are pretty progressive. So I think that it does succeed on that front as well.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. And yeah, I do think this definitely has a sense of being something that you can totally see why people love it, and why it's so revered because of that thing. Now, one element I do love so much, and this is like my favorite element, is the score. That score is so epic. And it's honestly funny because I heard it. I was like, I've heard this before. I know I have. Like, right? Like I was like, I've heard this score. I was convinced. And I was like, have I seen this movie? I did some digging and I have heard this score before because Disney has a library full of amazing, charming musical scores. But for some reason, when they wanted to sell their Blu-rays, they decided we need to get the rights to the Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves score because our music doesn't suffice. And for Disney,
Mhm.
one that has "When You Wish Upon a Star" and all these amazing Lion King, Aladdin, all these songs, and has to resort toward this film to be like, "Hey, can we use your music for our Blu-ray sale?" That's
Yeah.
pretty epic. And I think the score is just so good, almost to where like at times I was kind of tuning out of what was going on screen because I was just listening to the music and just kind of like letting it kind of wash over me because the music is so good here, and it really gives it that great swashbuckling feel that I feel like a lot of films kind of built themselves on. Like Pirates of the Caribbean, I think owes a lot to this because of the score. You know, the idea that that pirate score is so iconic. I think if this film didn't have as iconic a score, I don't think future swashbuckling films would think to even kind of incorporate such an anthemic type of feel to it. So yeah, the score in this is amazing, and I don't know if you agree because I know the music stuff we all want to talk about is the song, but I mean like
Mhm.
the score is just
The
absolutely
score the score is great. I think it incorporates the theme, like the theme from the song, really well, better than Three Musketeers did. The portion of that score that you're talking about, the it's also the Morgan Creek theme logo
yes,
music.
yeah, da da
Um,
da 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 da,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So yes, it's very recognizable. That score.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
it's so good. I want to listen to it now again. I want to watch this film again because I'm like, you know what? Now hearing what you have to say, I'm like, I think I gave it a hard shot. And I think I need to watch it again because the music is so good. Ugh.
I hope it grows on you because you're not going to have the experience that I have. I think there's a lot to love in it, especially if you let go of certain things that, especially from a modern view, you probably wouldn't. You'd probably dock a movie for. I think there's
Right.
certain things if you let them go and you just let the movie happen and watch what's happening on the screen. I think it's a really fun ride. Anyway, I do think that a lot of it is due to the nostalgia that I have with
Hmm.
it. Um, as I said, there's a lot of things in this movie that are just ingrained into my head. Um, certain things I even say every time I say the phrase, I say it the way it's said in this movie. There's a part where um, the they've come and raided their town and driven everybody into the forest. And Robin says, in just his most dramatic Robin Hood voice, he says, they said they've taken everything, and he turns and says, then by God, we take it back. And if I have to say take it back, I say it. I have to say it as dramatically as he says it, and I always have to include the by God. We're gonna take this, by God, we're gonna take this back. We have
That's
to do
great.
an exchange. By God, we're gonna
I
take this
For
back.
the subathon, I want to like have a drinking game and see how many times you can actually say "take it back" during the subathon. I think we should keep a tally. I think it'd be funny, but
Um,
don't tell anyone else. So unless you're watching it at 1:32:25 right now, the timestamp, unless you're watching it at this timestamp, no one else will know about it. So keep an eye out for it. I'm gonna make that a challenge of the subathon. See how many times Matt can say "take it back" as Kevin Costner. Um, One thing we kind of talked a little bit about the casting and like who we cast in it now, and I know Robin has just been done to death, so I have a
mhm.
different kind of casting question that was posed by Alan, who says Alan Rickman, obviously his namesake, has played, I don't know if that's true, has played three iconic bad guys at least, so much so that when you see him playing a good guy it's a bit jarring. What's the opposite effect? What mostly good hero type actor would you like to see go whole full on hammy villain? My answer, we kind of got a little bit of it last year with Barbie, Ryan Gosling. So what do you have an idea? I had one that I thought about that could be fun. Like
Let's hear yours while I think about it a
I
little
would
bit.
love to see one of our like my generation's like childhood heroes like just take on like a really sniveling smarmy like Daniel Radcliffe or Elijah Wood. I want to see play like just an absolute d bag, and it might exist somewhere. I might be forgetting something, but like because like
I mean,
Eternal Sunshine, he has moments, and Daniel Radcliffe.
Daniel
What do you think?
Radcliffe played it in Lost City recently.
Oh, I
The
didn't see
billionaire
that.
evil guy.
Okay. Yeah, so Elijah Wood would be my answer of like just full on villain turn, or Sean Astin. Like if we're going for Lord of the Rings, like
Oh,
these people
Sean
who are like
Astin.
just such good guys. It's like I'd love to see just a villain turn. But I just thought that was a fun question because it's like we're so used to see Alan Rickman play the bad guy now. Where it's like I forget when he's actually good, and when he is good, it's like what do we make of this? And that's like Christoph Waltz too. I'm like, wow, I've never really seen you not play the scary Tarantino villain. Even in
Right.
Big Eyes, he's got an element of that. But is there anyone that comes to mind as like a good guy that you would love to see like kind of sink their teeth into something a little more villainous? I almost
So
said Rachel McAdams, and I was like, no, she started as Mean Girls, so it would be going back.
I mean, we've kind of seen Chris Evans do it. I mean, we have seen him in
Yeah,
in
Scott
Knives
Pilgrim.
Out and in Gray Man. He was the villain in Gray Man? It's so
Yeah, I
hard
think
to
so. I don't
remember.
remember
Yeah,
who saw that. No, I mean, who
yeah, he
remembers that? Even if
passed.
you saw
Yeah.
that, you don't tell people you saw that.
Tom Holland.
Oh,
I think
yeah, that'd be cool.
I think that he is a
I
good
almost thought
enough
of
guy.
Tom Hanks, but I was like Elvis. But even then, that was more of just playing like kind of a nasty person. But like, I want to see him full on like mustache twirling Tom Hanks.
Yeah, see that. That
Yeah.
would be good.
So Holland and Hanks and Aston and yeah. Anyway, that was the only question that like piqued my interest of like, oh yeah, like I want to bring that up because that's
Well,
a good.
and he brings up the obvious. I mean, it's not a new point, which is that Alan Rickman plays a great villain. I mean, he always
Yeah.
has. I and by all accounts, he was one of the nicest men
Right.
in Hollywood.
Right.
But he plays just such a great villain, and I know that we there was a dispute over whether this was a villain, but even like in Love Actually, like he's the husband, but he's also kind of the villain of that piece.
There's no
Like,
one you root for less in that movie than him.
yeah,
Like,
that's
maybe
exactly.
the president, Billy Bob Thornton as the president,
Yeah.
maybe. But it's like, come on, like that is so that scene just breaks my heart when she gets the Joni Mitchell CD and he's so proud of himself and it's like you scumbag. Anyway, one last thing that Alan said as far as Robin Hood goes, it's simply a matter. This was kind of like when I was asking why this like formula gets done so often, or why Robin Hood gets remade so much. He says as far as Robin Hood goes, it's not simply a matter of good versus evil. There's also a class element of the rich and wealthy being taken down a peg by the lower class. This is
Hmm.
quintessentially British, which is another thing that I noticed as well, like
Hmm.
why this is such a revered story in general. But there have been bad ones. There, like Russell Crowe one wasn't good. The Taron Egerton one wasn't good. So like, not every Robin Hood's great, but
Right. That's true. I think that it's so easy to make this movie poorly
hmm
because the themes feel almost because the themes are relevant, and so you feel like you can take this movie and just do it, and it'll say what you need it to say. I think it's rarer to, especially these days, um, take this and actually make it into something memorable and great. This movie might not be it's definitely not perfect. We might not even call it great. It's great to me, but we might not even call
oh,
it
call
great.
it great because yeah, it's if it's great to you, it's great. That's
Well,
what I've always stood by. Yeah,
it's great as in a favorite. Great.
right.
I don't know. I don't know where I would put it technically, but it is at least memorable. An entire generation loves it, and that's what you're looking for. Like,
Right.
if your movie is the worst, by today's standards, is the worst movie ever made, but there's a generation of people who love it without irony.
hmm
It's a success.
Yeah, it's like me. It's like me in a certain Dr. Seuss movie, which we may talk about someday. Like it's like if you were there, if you had to be there, and it's like it speaks to a generation. I think that's like okay. In all seriousness, it's like the prequels. I think with me,
Mhm.
like that's like the action franchise that like if you were not there at the right time, in the right mood, the right mindset, the right age, right place, right time, like that series people hate so much. And I think the same is for the sequels as well. Like my sister, her first experience with Star Wars was Force Awakens, and she loves Rey. She loves that arc. She loves those three films. So I
Mhm.
think it really just goes to show like nostalgia plays such an important factor in it, but it is such an awesome factor to if you are on that right side of it. Like, and that's why I love that you brought up this theme and you brought up the idea of doing this because it's like yeah, we're a show about so bad they're good movies, and we obviously talk about bad movies, and some of these are, according to a lot of people, bad movies, but they're they're not though. Like that's the thing is like they're better movies if you were at the time and you have the nostalgia for them. But that's what makes every movie great, is your own personal attachment to them. There are people who
Mhm.
hate The Godfather just because it doesn't resonate with them. And that, you know what? They're
Right.
fair to think so. If The
Mhm.
Godfather's not a good movie to you, it's not a good movie. You know, and I think that's what the beauty of just us as viewers is. Like, we look so much at the binary of good versus bad, but it's like you really have to take into account all the circumstances, which is why when people are always like, "Oh, you got to separate art from artist," but I feel like the artist informs the art. You know what I mean? Like, and
Mhm.
if you're watching something in a wartime era and that war is in the back of your mind, inflicting your views on the material, like in the 40s or whatever, then that's why in Picture This we talk about the year it took place in, because that's important when you take in context. And I think
Right.
having heard what you said about Kevin Costner, now I want to watch this movie again with that context, and like the Morgan Freeman progressive stuff also, like that kind of stuff is what makes movies great, is that not necessarily are they good, are they bad, but like how do they resonate with you at what point in your life, and what do you take with
Right.
you in other parts of your life? What movies stay, which movies fall or slip away, you know? And I think that's really, really awesome. So I love this whole idea and this whole chat and this whole concept that you've conjured up, because I think we're going to do a lot of these in the future, because there's so
Yeah,
many
I
movies
think
where
so
we're
too.
like, is this a Framewreck movie? Is this so bad it's good? Well, I loved it as a kid, but I don't know. Perfect. Then let's talk about a Nostalgia Junction. You know, like that'll be the perfect
Right.
place to kind of talk about those movies. You know.
Well, let me. I this concept came, and then I was going to talk about this at the top, but the concept of this came because a while back on TikTok, you were doing those. You were doing the uh, box office game,
Yes.
and one of the movies was Batteries Not Included, which you hadn't seen.
Never heard of.
And
Still don't even remember
yeah,
that
you had
movie.
never heard of it at the time. I was like, you've never heard of that? I've seen that movie so many times. Um,
I
and
should look
I
it up.
knew
Yeah,
that at
maybe.
the time you hadn't seen Terminator 2. You have since seen it.
Yes,
But
and
the
I
concept was,
fucking love it.
okay, let's do a little movie club about kids who befriend robots. And then you saw that, and I was like, okay, so
Sorry, I
then we
didn't
can
realize.
do. No, you're fine, because I didn't really bring that up yet. And then I was like, okay, but there's plenty of kids befriending other things. There's these movies called Prehysteria
Hmm.
where these little dinosaurs show up, and these live action movies, little dinosaurs your kids befriend these little dinosaurs. I used to watch all the time when I was a kid. Anyway, that's not the point. We didn't end up doing that. So these movies were not on the radar when I came up with this concept,
Hmm.
but there's something about this that felt like it would be like this would be a good theme, and these would be good movies to
Hmm.
watch and compare. Um, we do have one more, another little set of comments from our friend Win.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
they were responding to a question about nostalgia. I
yes. Oh, well,
believe
yeah.
that
This is a
you,
great way to kind of cap it. Yeah.
yeah. You had asked. Let's see. How much do you weigh in nostalgia when looking back at films from your childhood? Are there films that you have liked more or less revisiting them at an older age? And Wynn said that they said I don't think about nostalgia at all. It's just a vibe I get. I think I like About Time more than most people because it reminds me of visiting my aunt. I love adventures and the childlike version of pirates where they are just scary enough to be villains, plus time travel and adventure and fun style of fighting. I think Zorro needs more mainstream movies.
Hmm.
We may have gotten a lot because you were asking about
Yeah.
swashbuckling
What
movies that we
other?
want more of.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like because we've seen so much of Robin Hood and so much of Three Musketeers. Like, what else could be remade? Zorro was on your
right.
list. Yeah.
And they said I think Zorro needs more mainstream movies. We've gotten a lot of Zorro movies, but none in the mainstream Western culture since 2005,
Yeah.
and not many more before that, unless you count Puss in Boots, which
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, which I do, but it's true. Like, we need more Zorro. But Win, thank you for those comments, especially the one about nostalgia. That's so interesting, because it's like I felt that way mostly about Pagemaster. Where I was watching this, I'm like, I don't know if I particularly love this, but I feel nostalgic watching it, and I wasn't
Hmm.
nostalgic about it. Like, I didn't have that nostalgic tie. I hadn't heard of that film till a month ago, but I was feeling nostalgic because it just evokes that kind of feeling. It's like Stranger Things, where like you're watching it, you're like, this feels nostalgic. And I think that's also like a testament to some movies, is that they have a time and a quality Not necessarily that they take place at a certain time, but they evoke a feel of the filmmaking at that time. And I think that's really
Right.
what's special about so much of these movies, which is why I could totally see. And at the end of every review I wrote, or I meant to, was, but I definitely would have loved this as a child, or maybe I would have loved
Yeah.
this as a child, because I really do think it kind of captures that nostalgic feel very well.
Right. Well, and a movie that when you say that, it makes me think about what movies have I felt a nostalgia for, even though I wasn't a kid, and it makes me think of, was it 2019? I think maybe before. I think it was 2019. There was a movie that came out called "The Kid Who Would Be King,"
Hmm.
and it was like a King Arthur tale, but like modern
Yeah.
day. Well, it was a modern day, like but like involved the King Arthurian
Lore.
legend.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I'm watching it, and I'm like, I would have watched this movie tomorrow morning immediately. Like that's how I
Right.
felt. Like I
Yeah.
was like, I, watching it made me feel so much nostalgia for the types of movies I loved back in the day, back when I was a kid. My kids all watched it with me, and we had a good time. And it was great. We all loved it, and I think that movie is very underseen. I think
Yeah.
if you've
I
never
haven't
seen The
seen it.
Kid
I
Who Be
should. I
King,
should. Yeah.
yeah, go watch it because
Hmm.
it's very good.
Well, that's even
But
how I felt about like Dungeons and Dragons even this year, which again I didn't love, but it gave me this sense of like nostalgia that I was like, wow, like this makes me feel like they don't make movies like this anymore. It was that exact
Mhm.
feeling of like just because it's so much detail put into other areas that you don't necessarily see today all the time,
Right,
which I love.
you didn't love Dungeons and Dragons? Come on,
I
I'm
liked it.
kidding.
I
I'm kidding.
wasn't,
I'm kidding.
and that's another thing too. Not even nostalgia, but like personal experiences. I've never played a day of Dungeons and Dragons in my life, and a lot of the
Hmm.
lore went over my head. It was still a very funny adventure story, and that's another thing too. Is like I think Alan, especially, had so much great things to say. And if you're not in our Discord or in other Discords, go check it out. Wherever Alan is, go follow him. But Alan, comment below because we know you're listening. But it's like he's so in tune with like the politics of like Britain and France and stuff that like this stuff he's able to engage a lot with that stuff where I'm not, and I think that was the thing that Chad was talking about too. He's like, I don't care about French politics. And it's like, what, fair, you're not French. And I get it, like we should be kind of open to all areas of life. But again, like if you're not in this specific mindset, maybe it's not going to speak to you as much. And that was kind of like Dungeons and
Right,
Dragons. Like some of it went over my head, but I
I
still
got
enjoyed
you.
it. And I think that's the thing, like with all these movies, it's like, however your personal experience informs it. Like I am coming off of this saying that the Errol Flynn Robin Hood cannot be matched. And it's like, that kind of
Hmm.
is unfair when looking at it. Whereas Three Musketeers, I haven't seen a lot of Three Musketeers adaptations. I saw the Mickey, Donald, and Goofy one they made for straight to DVD, which is awesome, by the way, if you haven't seen it. So I don't really have anything to be like, oh, this is the grand standard. So like I kind of like it a
Right,
little more. But at Pagemaster, I'd never seen anything like it. So I was like, wow, but it still captured that nostalgic feel. So I think it's like such an interesting journey that we're gonna go through with this kind of side quest of like looking at each other's, because there's gonna be movies that from my childhood that you're gonna be like, you like this as a kid, unironically, and I'm gonna say yes, and I don't care if I watched it all the time. And now, like for example, the one we alluded to earlier, Cat in the Hat. I know now there are issues with Cat in the Hat. It's not a great movie, but at the time I watched it every day as a kid. I loved it so much.
there you
And
go.
I know
Yeah.
Matt hates it. But that's the thing, is like maybe Matt'll see it like from the lens of nostalgia, maybe he won't, and that's fine. Like, and I think that's what is so awesome about this show in particular, is because you curated these films and you get to like kind of talk about why you like them and talking about the VHSs
Mhm.
and all that. I mean, we've talked almost 2 hours and it feels like one of our shortest episodes because it just feels like we're just talking and we
Right.
don't have
Yeah.
this like set like breakdown of what we have to get to. We just kind of get to flow our thoughts, which
Right.
if you can't tell, I love this episode. Was great and I loved it so much.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about next month,
Okay.
February. We were
Love.
actually gonna. What's that?
I just said love.
Love. Yes, February, Valentine's Day. We were
Oh
gonna
gosh, the
extend
holiday.
this and do a second episode of this, Nostalgia Junction next month, but then we decided let's spread this out. Let's do several of these.
Mhm.
So we're not going to do that. We're not gonna just go straight into the next episode. We're gonna let this series marinate for a
Also,
long time.
I don't know if this was ever his intention, but Matt knows that I am starting a new show next month, rehearsals, and I'm not going to have a lot of time to watch 3 movies on top of the 10 I have to watch for Picture This, on top of all the movies that Matt and I are both watching for Oscars this year, Oscars, like all the short films, documentaries, and stuff. So he's actually doing me a gift. He doesn't know it, but he's doing me a gift. So thank you.
Yes, that's exactly why
He
I
saw
made
my
this.
plate was getting full and kicked me out of the buffet. He said, "You need to go home. You need to digest. You need to not
No,
not watch 3 more films."
So next month we're just going to do one film instead of three, and it's going to be a regular
the
Framewreck
doozy.
episode. The problem is neither of us have seen this movie, so we don't know if it's a Framewreck. We don't know if it's
Could be
being
amazing.
underserved. It could be great. We could both love it.
Could be
It's
the
got
next Godfather.
yeah. It's okay. So it's a very divisive movie from Netflix, right? It's on Netflix. Netflix, and it even got a sequel, despite how divisive it is.
Got two.
It got two, apparently. Oh gosh, we're just
Yup.
watching the first one. We're
Yup.
watching the kissing booth for Valentine's Day. Why? Because because I haven't seen it and he hasn't seen it, and it's going to be
Jacob
a fun
Elordi is on
experiment.
the rise. Jacob Elordi's on the rise.
That's true. Yeah,
and
yeah,
Joey
yeah.
King as well. I mean, they're both like two very like kind of up and coming actors, and I don't even think it's Jacob Elordi. No, it is. Okay, good. I was worried at first that it wasn't. I got my actors wrong, but yeah, Jacob Elordi's having a moment. So we're celebrating him because Saltburn
Right.
got no nominations. Priscilla got no nominations.
Yeah. So we're gonna watch that, and who knows? It might be a Framewreck redemption next month. We don't know.
We have the graphic ready to go. Imagine.
We'll be back to you next month around Valentine's Day.
Yes.
For
Yes.
Framewreck and the kissing booth.
And we are doing a romantic themed picture this, but that's 10 movies. So like this will be out by Valentine's Day because this is one movie we can get it watched and get it done by Valentine's Day. So Valentine's Day, you know what? Let's say we'll drop this on Valentine's Day. This is going to drop on Valentine's Day, Kissing Booth. So snuggle up next to your significant other, best friend, spouse, whoever it may be, dog, and just have a nice time watching us talk about kissing booths. I don't know. I know nothing about it, really.
I know nothing about it either.
All right,
except
this is
that it's
fun.
divisive. I literally only know that there are a lot of people who hate it and enough people that love it that it got sequels.
I mean, yeah, there's a contingent. Yeah, it's like they got tattoos, and I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, so Matt, where else can they find you? This brilliant idea of yours. Thank you again for this conversation, and thank you for being easy on me for not loving these as much as you, but also thank you for enlightening me on why you love them so much because it was such a fun discussion. I hope you.
I honestly hope that these find their way into your rotation again at some point. In your life, and that you are able to look at them a little bit differently. But yes, I had a great time. I loved revisiting these movies.
I will show these to my kids someday. I really will.
Oh, good,
and I think that'll be the best lens to look at it too, because I could love watching it through their nostalgia, and then I could be like, "Yo, Uncle Matt, come look at this photo of my kids watching Kevin Costner and not minding his accent. Look, they're rapping out to Bryan Adams."
But you can find me anywhere on the internet. Twitter and Letterboxd specifically at MattmanXIII, and then here on the Dill Pickle Movie Network.
That's right. Is it because it sounds like I, or is it? I just realized that. I was like,
it's 13. It's 13, but
it's cooler 13. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I love the MattmanXIII, but I've never really asked about it, or maybe I have. It's been a while. We've been doing the show for a while. This is the first of our new year, so like we're just excited to be back. It's 2024. Yeah. I'm putting on the glasses. You can find me. Yes, you can find me, Dylan Randazzo, at Letterboxd and Twitter. Matt said it right as well. Just want to make sure. Twitter. And then the Dill Pickle Movie Network if you're listening on podcast. But you really should be looking at the video, especially right now, because there's something to see. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. And if you watch these movies and if you participate in the discussion, it's really fun. We might not do this for every Framewreck episode, unless you guys want to. If you guys are in our Discord, the Dill Pickle Movie Network Discord, and you guys are like, wow, these guys are covering movies I want to talk about. If you're a Kissing Booth fan and you want to let us know why it's the next Godfather Part 4, let us know in the Discord why you love it so much, and we will read your comments. We might not facilitate this kind of like roundtable movie club like discussion every time, but I think it'd be a lot of fun to do so every now and then, especially for these nostalgia junctions, because there are also so many people that share nostalgia, which is why I wanted to get such a grand like kind of scope of it. But this was really fun, really cool experiment. Any last thoughts, concerns?
No, I'm good.
Cool. All right, I'm good too. Everyone, peace out. Have a great, happy rest of your new year, and we'll hopefully see you 11 more times. Like, don't make this your last one. We're only just getting started, and we can't wait. Bye.
What a story, Mark.